So, good afternoon and welcome to day 5 of the Auroville Festival. And when we started off, we mentioned that the first 4 days we will be exploring each aspect of the mother which has been done. From day 5 to day 8, we will be exploring how the aspirational aspect of this can be embodied, can be actually lived and debated and discussed. So today we will be exploring what's this aspiration of the deep comprehension of the power of Maheshwari. How can that which is embedded in knowledge becomes a living wisdom in each one of us? Which aspects of integral education need to be strengthened in Auroville? Because one of the aspects that we're looking is how do we really live in this in Auroville? But it's also looking at that Auroville is an example of for human unity in humanity. It can be looked across as an integral educational aspect across the world. To pursue the path of uneducation and constant progress and a community of youth that never ages. So welcome to each one of you, and I'm going to invite Nilima to give a very brief description of each one of you for the benefit of our audience to look at the diversity of the experience that we have. And I understand this is a huge topic. It's very deep as well. But what we will try and look and explore is the integrality of the aspect and the living application of it. Yeah?
Good afternoon, everybody. So we have today Love Kamath. Love Kamath has done his BSc in Agra, and then his higher studies he pursued in Germany. He moved to Auroville in 2004, and he became the executive of the Auroville Institute of Applied Technology. He has been instrumental for its development as the best vocational educational institute in the region. We have Preeti with us. Preeti has been an artist and integral educator, and she's been practicing and adopting integral education for more than 2 decades. She works with the Sri Aurobindo Society as a teacher, trainer, and research scholar. Preeti has also worked as a volunteer in Mirambika, which is a free progress school in Delhi. So, welcome, Preeti. We have Shankar. Shankar is a long-time Aurovillian and connected himself with Auroville through children of various Auroville schools. He has been working as a Tamil language teacher, and he believes in the vision of integral education given by the mother and Sri Aurobindo. And we have Uday with us. Uday teaches at the Ashram School in Pondicherry. He pursued his higher education in master's in NYU and then his engineering at Columbia University. He returned to India, and at present he has designed a fresh curriculum for high school students centered around Indian history and culture. And he also teaches a year-long course on critical thinking for university students. And then we have Auravan. Auravan is a child of Auroville, born, brought up in Auroville, a student, and now a teacher at La School. So welcome, everybody.
So I'm going to start off with, like we talked about, it is a lifelong learning, right? And the lifelong learning is an aspect of the sincerity in the mind, or let's say sincerity in the being. And we have explored what does sincerity really mean. But there is also in an aspect where the mind can dupe oneself, right? There's a tendency of the mind to always give another layer or another layer of interpretation. So man's nature, especially in his mental nature, has a spontaneous tendency to give a favorable explanation for everything that he thinks, feels, says, or does. How does one really even work with this obstacle, if I can use the word as that? So Auroville, the fact that you've been a child of Auroville, you've grown up and you teach, in your experience, how does one really work with this nature, the mental nature, where giving an explanation is easy, but the ability to step back and the ability to look at this nature and therefore pursue a lifelong learning that is deeply integral, that is deeply synthesizing the several aspects of what true education is. What are your thoughts or feelings or your experiences of this?
Better?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess it would start with just the awareness, the knowing, really the knowing, the psychological understanding that the mind does dupe itself all the time. Because I think a lot of the time we have a sense, if there's a certain aspiration to wish to be truthful, to wish to be sincere, we have the sense that we are sincere, but then there are parts of us that are a little hidden from ourselves. There are ways in which, if we have especially a good mind, a good argumentative mind, we can argue pretty much anything. There's a character called Cardinal Richelieu. He was a pretty frightening church fellow. He's said to have said in his time, "Give me 5 words, any 5 words a man says, and I can hang him." It's not a very joyful way to start this conversation, but the point is the mind can argue anything. So, to come back a few years ago, as you asked, my experience growing up here as well, when I was, I think, around age 13, 14, I remember sitting at this little bench at school. I was looking out into the garden, and there was a little bit of trouble brewing around Auroville, like it might be trouble brewing a little bit now. And, 14-year-old, a little bit upset at how people were treating each other, the way they were behaving, and I could not understand for the life of me how it was possible that individuals who had at some point in their life made this choice, made this commitment to come here, left everything, whether they're from right next door or all the way across the world, left everything to dive into this experiment. How, if that was the starting point, how could they, the they that was all surrounding, be treating each other this way and behaving this way, which was petty and incomprehensible for me? And I was angry, really angry, because what do you do as a 14-year-old? Nobody's going to listen to you much. And what did I know any more than anybody else? And I remember sitting on that bench, and it hit me. I kept saying they in my mind. So, but wait, that could be me. I was so full of this burning aspiration. And I said, wait, that really can be me. For me, that was a frightening moment. And the question then that ensued, and I think that was the beginning of my whole journey, and deepening into education at least, but journey also of my own yoga, of my own sadhana, was what if that can be me? And it can at any moment. We're made of the same stuff. Then what is the safeguard? Is there a safeguard? And if so, how do I begin to live that and to practice that on a daily basis? So I churned and churned and churned, and the safeguard that came was sincerity. But not just the surface sincerity. I mean, this kind of burning sincerity. The sincerity to look within and to say, you know what, this I don't want to look at. And to say, okay, I'm not ready to look at that. But at least I know there's something in me I don't want to look at. And I think that at an individual level, that was the beginning of that journey, and it still is the same journey on a daily basis. Working with teenagers, because that's the age group I like to work with, is developing that capacity, exactly like you said, to step back. To step back. And we have, I guess, over time, developed all sorts of little methodologies that can help to do that. But I think a young child and a teenager, because a teenager, it's that age where you're forming yourself, really. You're starting to figure out who you are, or at least who you're not. There is more openness to questioning oneself than when we start to rigidify into adults. And this is where I find it tricky. Because one can find a certain, you look at little kids, there's an honesty, there's a sincerity of attitude. When they're in the moment, they're wholly in the moment, and when they're not, you know it. And with teenagers, that is a moment that can begin to veil itself, where one can start to tell ourselves, we can tell ourselves lies, we tell each other lies, but especially ourselves. And if at that phase of adolescence, one can find another hook. And I tell my students, my kids, I don't care what you tell the world. At this point, that's not the point of focus. But at least to yourself. know when there's an insincerity. Acknowledge it. You don't need to fix it. Acknowledge it. Put it somewhere. Deal with it when you're ready to deal with it. Because these insincerities, I mean, they come up with, if we're looking at integral education, we're looking at the body, we're looking at the vital, we're looking at the mind in terms of instruments. All of it ought to be centered around the psychic. How do we touch upon that? And isn't that the sincerest part of ourselves? And if we can start to touch that through a certain capacity for practice from the youngest age onwards, and if that continues through teenage, through adolescence, a 19, 20-year-old who has the capacity to go inward and touch this, those moments of difficulties are that little bit shorter. Because they know that regardless of the mud they're rolling in, there's something else. And that needs to be sustained past childhood. It needs to go into adolescence.
Thank you for sharing that. But the thought that comes to my mind right now is it's an endeavor to build this capacity, to create that space, to also acknowledge that it's okay that you feel insincere, but if you don't want to deal with it, you park it and come to it when you're ready. That works when I'm sitting with myself, but I'm also a part of a collective. A collective that at times influences you, or pressurizes you, or asks you to confirm or conform. For whatever reasons, because while we can build with young children and the youth, as adults who carry impressions and who are working still those impressions, it takes time. And that's probably my little example of working with the world outside. How do you deal with that when the interaction with you is safe, or maybe with people that they feel that they can feel safe with? But when they go into spaces where the safety is either questioned, or it feels it's going to be destabilized, or it feels like it's a voice that I don't know I can voice it, I can trust the voice as well, and either. How does one deal with that, and as a lifelong learning process? And interestingly, I would love to ask Uday is that one of the introduction was given is that you teach critical thinking skills. How do they combine with each other?
Should I quickly? All right. I think it's precisely in this. The sincerity is first towards ourselves. And if sincerely I can understand my strengths and weaknesses to begin with, it's very much surface level. It's just the psychological strengths and weaknesses. When I find myself in the outside world that questions that, if I know my strengths, and my strengths are questions, not an issue. If I know my weaknesses, and my weaknesses are questions, all right, I know I need to work on it. It actually puts me a step ahead. And then there's the need, the capacity to be able to keep growing and take criticism that comes in. And double check, because what I might have thought was a strength, usually there's the other aspect, the other side of the coin, which is the weakness of it. But just from that psychological standpoint, if we have that capacity of analyzing oneself and analyzing oneself in situations, it gives us an edge the moment we are in a collective, rather than makes us lose that edge.
Just to specifically on the aspect of critical thinking, to your point, Sudhaji, which is it takes a while to develop. I mean, in addition to what Auravan said about sincerity and the importance of sincerity in this whole, I have found that without practice, it's all meaningless. It's all theory, it's all good talk. So the only way, and Sri Aurobindo himself suggests this while he writes on education, that the mind has to be given a chance to develop itself through systematic practice. So what we try and do and have been doing in these critical thinking classes is we actually spend months through various exercises reflecting, challenging ourselves or the author or me, or knowing that there is no real expert, but it takes a while. It's not easy. There are lots of ingrained practices. There are a lot of ingrained assumptions, such as the teacher is always right, or it's an author who is well known, well received, and therefore he or she must be right. So to step back and be able to question each of these things, one of the outcomes is to be able to question a lot. And this questioning also acts like a muscle. It gets stronger the more you use it. So That's the long and short of it, but it just takes a lot of practices to simplify.
So you studied here and then you went to US to get, and now you're coming back, or not you're coming back, you're already back in teaching. What has been your observation of an integral education as a practice itself, and the kind of education that's in Auroville or in Pondicherry, and the kind of education we all get schooled into or have been through? What has been your experience of that role, and what aspects does it really need, do really need to be strengthened?
So it's a super broad question, but in the context of Auroville, one can see Auroville has certain strengths with regard to, or with respect to, the ashram. Certain vaster field of opportunities, a much greater ability to experiment, and in terms of actually addressing these strengths and weaknesses, I think one can start with the easiest of these fruit, which is the physical domain, or the physical education, which the mother spoke about. So there's a lot that can be done. In Auroville we have Certitude, we have Deha Shakti, which have grown tremendously over the years in terms of the opportunities for children. If we have to look up to the one system which the mother literally, not just figuratively, oversaw the building of, it's the physical education in the ashram school, which is, there's probably no place which is as systematic and thorough as the ashram school at present. It's not perfect, and everybody knows it's not perfect. They themselves know it's not perfect, but it's exceptional compared to any other place that exists. And there's a certain discipline that is followed, a certain rigor that is followed, which is hard for most outsiders to understand why this is required. And for this, again, we have to go back. Why she's so insistent on such hard rules, which one might say, or balk at in today's modern world and say, but I want to do what I feel like doing. But physical education is that one place. So in Auroville, it would be wonderful over the years to see some, let's say a physical education coordinator who actually works with all the schools of Auroville. And they have different schedules, they have different timings, and to figure out a weekly, a monthly, and basically an annual program which creates a daily routine of physical education. And by this I mean we have to go, of course, beyond games. So games is wonderful, games are nice to have, but children playing together is not necessarily physical education. Children play together in apartment communities all over the world. That's not physical education. So the kind of consciousness which the mother would like to develop through a systematic approach requires exceptional people. So we have many wonderful people actually in Auroville, and she actually puts interestingly an even higher emphasis on the group captains, or the people or the individuals who are in charge of the physical education process, as compared to, let's say, even the teachers in the school. So the teachers already have to have a very high caliber. She expects, she would like these teachers to be aspiring yogis, eventually yogis, but the group captains she places an even higher emphasis on. And this is important to understand in the context of where she is wanting us to look at, or where she is looking for the future to be built out of, which is this base, which is a very important, crucial base, largely ignored by conventional education. So Auroville has the means, the capacities, the environment. It has many, many things in its favor. So physical education would be the first of these starts. And then next would be mental education, which again, conventionally most schools focus just on mental education in a very simplistic way. But if you look at the 5 different phases through which she explores this crucial aspect of education, which is the power of concentration, which needs to be first built up, then a certain wideness which comes about after it, and then the development of synthesis, anti-synthesis, the broadness to develop into a silence, which she says is a still greater aspect of mental education. So conventional education stops at the first one, which is the power of concentration, because there's so many exams and you have so much to study, so inevitably you will have to develop a power of concentration. but she adds 4 different layers to it. So we can do a lot more for sure in that regard. And also it's worth asking in this context, and I have a couple of things in this regard, which is, there's this famous Hollywood movie which is The Pursuit of Happiness, right? There's also, to me internally, there's a phrase which is the pursuit of excellence, which matters a lot to me as an educator and for children in general. How, pray, should children aspire towards excellence? And should they, or would they look towards it as something worthwhile? And if so, how would they be inspired? Who are their role models? So in this context, if I have just a couple of things that I would like to, I'd like to bring in here, which is, should children in Auroville be good at their studies? It's a broad question, but it's worth reflecting. Should they be good at their studies, or is it okay for them to be just so-so? And to take a step further forward, is so-so a fine outcome for the collective? Right? And can a future community, since we are building out for the next 20, what we're doing now is going to decide Auroville of 25 years later, is the future community of Auroville going to be built by so-so individuals and a few good men and women? So exceptions have always existed, but it's a question worth pondering about. And another word which is very famous in the Indian context is this word called padhaku, which is a studious type. Okay, so is it okay to be a studious type in Auroville? Is it even desirable? And these are a little bit controversial, but because generally there's a misunderstanding of this concept of free progress, that anything goes. My mother would be the last person to say, I would imagine, going by her written words, that anything does not go. There has to be structure, there has to be discipline, even within free progress. So, but here's my own personal learning from this, which matters to me, and I try and share with my students through example, which is follow the masters. So mother wrote on this concept of, is it worth being studious or whatnot? She says, at your age, I was exclusively occupied with my studies. So I want to just say that again. I was exclusively occupied with my studies, finding things out, learning, understanding, knowing. So, worth reflecting on. Another question that comes up, which is, what advice would you give to a student who does not apply himself to his studies? Let's think about this in today's educational context. What advice would we give such a student who does not apply himself to his studies? It's okay, maybe find something else, or maybe see what interests you, etc. Mother's advice: studies strengthen the mind and turn its concentration away from the impulses and desires of the vital. Again and again, she links ideas for us. Concentrating on study is one of the most powerful ways of controlling the mind and the vital. That is why it is so important to study. So should one study only when one feels up to it? Another question that we educators face. I'm sure, like I work with teenagers also. Should one study only when one feels up to it? Mother's advice: make your brain work by studying regularly and systematically. So this is very, very, it's out there. There's a lot that's in this context. And even to the extreme, I'll give you one final extreme example of this, which is, what advice would you give to a student who was not able to grasp new ideas quickly and not able to think clearly? So mother's suggestion here: study more, reflect more, do intellectual exercises. Literally, this is her writing. So even in the context of mental education, I feel we have a lot of reflecting to do as educators, to aim and pursue excellence in our own lives, and therefore demonstrate by way of example that it is worth pursuing for our students. But that standard has to be very high. And it's not an academic standard, it's not a number, it's not a grade on an exam, but it's just demonstrating the pursuit of excellence. I feel in every department which she set up through time, every single department, the effort was, it was not the modern or conventional 80-20 rule. It was the idea of perfection, which is, why would you do anything less than what is perfect? It just has to be perfect. There was no, it's almost okay, let's be happy with this, it's okay. It was a very, very demanding, and those who worked closely with the mother recount their stories that she would be aghast at this shoddy work being done and being passed off as, this is, you're actually telling the mother this is fine. And then she will come back and say, no, we have to do a lot more. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you for sharing those. I think, like rightly as you said, they're very pertinent questions. And I think these are questions that are alive through decades. Something that we keep asking. I don't know whether we'll ever arrive at any answers, or whether when you say about free progress versus the structure that is really needed to, how do you even balance that? But the essence that came is, for me, is that is to be a learner for lifelong. And to that, then I would ask this question to Preeti. What did mother mean, or what was it from the perspective when she says to be a lifelong learner? What does this look like? Is it just an attitude? Is it just an expression? What is the, the engagement of it? And a learner of what? And one can have an intellectual learning capabilities when we can, but how does one also bring that into a living wisdom, right? Embody that in the here and the now. And when she mentions a youth never ages, on one hand is the cosmetic that we're looking at where we don't want to age, but I'm sure that is not what she intended. But when she says a youth that never ages, what does she mean by that? How does one really bring this alive as a lifelong learning aspect, whether it is also in schools and homes and communities and the collective?
So,
sorry, I know I asked too many things, but
yeah. So, Sudha, thanks. I prepared a lot of things that I thought I should, and as an educator should, and plan as much as possible. But well, what I'm going to share first is there an example of this youth that has, we always, I think it's much better that we talk if we've actually seen something or experienced something that really stays with us. So I walked into the Delhi ashram, Sri Aurobindo ashram, Delhi branch. Have you been there? Many of you? You've met Tara Didi? She's an example of everlasting youth. She's been with the mother, and it was my pleasure, great joy to work with her. And I actually saw that, she's up before anybody else in the ashram is up. And she switches off after 5 o'clock, switches off in the sense she goes into her silence. It's not switching off in the sense, but it's actually creating a lot of inner space for yourself. What we call me time. And yet, when she's there in her work time, she's fully there. What he just said, there was an example of Tara Didi herself. I was compiling this book with her, Learning with the Mother, where she said, Mother used to tell her to, in those days, there were these evening classes with the children that had started. So the recitations and dictations. And Mother used to tell her to type, and she, there were typewriters, there were no computers at that time. And she would type, and then Mother would find one mistake, and then she would tell her to go, to do it again. And then again there would be something, maybe an error. Mother was never satisfied. So once Tara Didi actually put the whitener, Mother was really aghast. She said, you go marching back and you do this. And Tara Didi said, actually today I feel that it has taught me that, when I'm, it's not that she's the founder or she's like, the boss there or something, but the details really matter. And she's not even completed the ashram school. Mother said, it's fine. You do not want to. So she said, Tara, what do you want to do? I do not want to do knowledge. Knowledge is college in the ashram school, college level equivalent. What do you want to do? She said, Mother, I like photography. She said, wonderful. Then you must do photography. And that's what she did. And Tara Didi has today the collection of photographs that we have of Mother and the ashram is all because of her. There were, of course, others, but a great part of the collection is owing to her. So mother really brought out the best. But my question to that is that, did mother bring out the best to something that was not already there in her? And in each one of us there is. And that's what Sri Aurobindo actually wrote in 1910, when he was, after he came out of the Alipur jail. He actually wrote these, I would say he furiously wrote these articles in the Karma Yogin, And after that, he actually had to stop writing and then go to Chandarnagar and then come to Pondicherry. But so they were incomplete articles on education he wrote. And it's fascinating. He wrote these 3 principles of education, which are like the key takeaways of integral education. And in 1910, they mattered. I think they existed even during the Vedic times, and they matter now too. The first principle is so revolutionary, is so bold. What does it say? Anybody? Nothing can be taught. It actually takes out the roles of teachers away. What is the teacher doing? Nothing can be taught. So what does the teacher do? Then the second line he says, the teacher is there, she is required, but it's like she's a friend and a guide. She's not a taskmaster. And then he says, then what does she do as a friend and a guide? She helps the child or the person. It could be of any age. Then he actually says in the third sentence, it could be any age. He says, find that knowledge which is already there within. Just unravel it, kind of like just like a peel, take it out. So does she do it for him? No. He says just shows that there it is. And that's it. So 2 fundamental things. What does this principle really bring about? That it creates, what does the teacher do? Just a friendly, loving atmosphere. It's very, 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 very important. It is taken out as a very simple thing, very difficult to do. You had a fight at home, and you're coming into the classroom. How do you do it? How do you make that shift? But as she said, the moment you become sincere, what are you for? What are you here for? And then that shift can happen, that stepping back can happen. It takes a lot of practice, but I've seen that it happens. And the children can sense it. And that is when the sincerity of the teacher is most important. So if she's coming into the classroom and saying, hey, quieten down, is she quiet within? So the children can actually be listening to you and, saying obediently, okay, she's come and said that and we should. A little bit of fear is there and all of those things. But there are some who don't even care. Some children who don't care. And those are the ones who actually test the teacher. And then you know that whether you are in your silence or not. Are you really, really, really their friend? Really the one who cares? So that is a very difficult thing to do, but the first thing to do. And then the second thing, to help the child. So in the first principle, actually he says that the knowledge is right there. How can it be right there? So that means you don't need to study anything. How is it right there? So in the synthesis of yoga, again Sri Aurobindo says that there are 2 kinds of knowledge. One is the lower knowledge, the kind of apparent knowledge that if we want to know, the moment you're born, the moment a child is born, the child wants to know. It is What is that thing that makes you want to know, want to see, want to feel everything, want to sense? That is that power of the Maheshwari. That is the power, the force of knowledge, her force that comes and wants you to know. Yes, you come to know the outer world, and as he said, you want to know and you want to know and you want to perfect it and you perfect it, and yet you go down to the best perfection, and yet you want to know that. Then it comes, what is that real perfection? What is the reality behind all of this apparent knowledge? That, he says, when the seeker is onto that, that is that higher knowledge that he seeks. Behind all that apparent knowledge, there is something, the truth that lies. And that is when you go to that, and all knowledge will actually lead you to that. And we see that, right? We see all scientists and everybody actually, after a point, what is it? What is it? What is it that is making the eyes see? What is it that is making my mind think? What is it that is making me talk? What is that force? And then one becomes quiet. So it is, he says, that when the turning, and then in the second principle he says, so how do you tap that knowledge that is within? How do you take its help so that you can know everything? He says, the inner nature, actually says the mind, but that is in the traditional, at that time he was still using the term, the traditional terminology. So it is the antakarna, the inner nature. The inner nature has to be consulted in its growth. So where he says that every man has something divine in him, and we have to turn, as she said, the psychic, we have to turn towards that. We have to turn towards that, and the learning happens. Now, a little example. I have been a parent. So when I walked into Mirambika, I wasn't a parent, and when my child happened, and she was in Mirambika, she actually did not want to study at all. All she wanted to do is to climb trees, and not to read and write, and they did not even, there was, in the whole of kindergarten, there was no reading and writing. Nothing was really taught. If a person from a normal system, an educational system comes, what is happening? Nothing, everybody's just generally hanging around on trees. But I saw the magic that when the teacher, the integral educator, walks into the classroom, she walks in with her silence, and all the children follow her like a pipe, you know, as if she's the Pied Piper, and they're following her, and they quieten down. 4-year-olds also. That was the power I saw. And in that power, they play, they do everything in that silence. They're building sandcastles, they're doing a lot of things, but they're doing it with a lot of silence. A lot of work has happened on the part of the teacher, where she has really, really worked on herself and been with her divine nature, and that's how she helps the child bring out his or her divine nature out. And I saw today, my child is 16 years, almost 16 years. She's in the ashram school, and she reads and she writes. She wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning on her own. She's in free progress. She wants to study. She wants to play. She wants to do art. She wants to do music. She wants to do dance. She wants to do all of that. So I feel that training, that, you know, to be with one's inner nature and to be in that silence, it was really there. And the child was not doing anything. It was the teacher who was practicing all of these principles. So the principle was actually practiced by the teacher. And I think that was so beautiful. It's so profound, and it's happening. And it's happened with me also as an educator. I've walked into a classroom of children jumping on the benches. This was a normal school. And I would not start the class till everybody quietened down, so I would just be sitting there. And they would, after 10-15 minutes of jumping and shouting and doing whatever they wanted, one of them would come and nudge me. I would sit with my eyes closed. What are you doing? Are you sleeping? Are you meditating? Then the other one would come. No, she's just angry with all of us because we're not, we've not round ourselves and we're not sitting because she's come in the classroom. So all of this, till all of them came and sat in a semicircle around me and actually quietened down because they were so curious that what is happening and why is she sitting so quietly. It took me a lot of strength to do that. To not to be shaken by that outer noise. And that's what I feel this second principle is so profound, and we can use it in our life, in each and everything. What do we do when we are shaken up? Consult your inner nature, nothing. Consult your inner nature and there you are. You can start from there. You can't go right up to the psychic. Go just a little more. Just step back and just a little deep. Just a little bit, and the practice will start. And then the third principle, which is actually the simplest, but which is the best. So where does one start? I want everyone to quieten down. I want the best education. I want Auroville to improve. I want everything to improve. I want the whole world to improve. I want all of us to be so good. Are Baba, he says, no. It won't work like that. Start from the near to the far. He says, start from yourself first, and then you can work on others. It cannot happen otherwise. Where the mother also says in one of her articles, the first thing to do in order to educate a child is to educate oneself. And what is this education she's talking about? Not the ABCs. It's to master oneself. Are you your own master? So that's it, Sudha.
Thank you so much. Thank you for through that anecdotes, I think bring back alive some of the things that I think we have been exposed to. But in the pursuit of something in the outer, there's a tendency to probably not pursue this a lot more. And coming to that, you work in the sphere of higher education. And communities as such as ours that emphasize free progress, free thinking, allowing the child's innate ability to this, there is a certain expectation after a certain level to take a place in the society, right? And that is where the narrowing comes, right? Then you have a board exam and then the degree and all of that. How, even if that is mandate or necessary, how does one still train or bring in that approach that allows this synthesis, this integrality to become deeper and alive, and you still can have the best of both the worlds? How do you do that? What's been your experience? What would you suggest? If you could just give a couple of points.
I think there is much truth in this sentence, nothing can be taught. And what we can learn is by example, by practicing at each level, whether it is a higher education level or school level. You are learning always from example. Teachers, when they are engaged, when they are involved, when they are practicing, then the students will learn from that. And this is for me, in our school, we are trying that should be the main principle. The teacher should be an example for the student. And he should practice, not just teaching all the time theory and all these things. That is not so much important for us. For me, it is important that they are learning by doing. By working on project, they are learning, okay, how to do, what difficulties are coming up, and from the difficulties they are learning, so what, overcoming that. They don't know, they may not be getting the result, what is coming out of because they are trying. This practical part for me is the most important part. I myself have practiced in my life. All the time, starting something new, learning from that, what is at present important, but you are saying lifelong learning, for me is being open to that, what is coming now, what is now. Today we have new technology coming up. If I am still attached to my old technology, I cannot teach. So important for me is to be open, to be present, and that is how we can live. That be present in the moment. What is now, from that start something what we can do. So practicing for me is the only point where say, okay, learning by doing. What is there? What is the moment, what the result what I'm getting? Maybe a failure, maybe a positive, how we can improve it, how we can make it better. And from the mistake, from the errors, from the failure, we can learn. And that is what I have learned also in Karma Yoga. For me, my father was an example of Karma Yogi. And myself, I'm practicing and saying, okay, whatever result is coming, I'm taking that and start coming from that, beginning from that result. Not keeping, okay, so certainly you have to analyze, you have to analyze what is the reason for failure and all these things, but not going back on making complaint and he has done and that mistake is done. You cannot change that. So the lesson what we are learning, what we are teaching also the students, to be positive, to get confidence. You can get confidence only when you are able to result and change. That you can do it, you can make it. And that is for me the main part of education, that I have the confidence I can do it. I can make it, and I'm practicing. All the result what you are getting from books and examination, that is, I don't like that. I don't bother for that. Because I am not coming from a family where elite system is really maintained, and so everyone, he is that, he is that, he is that. I'm coming from middle class family, I would say, also not elite families, and we make it. And I think that is important for education, that we are not concentrating ourselves at the elite class and say, okay, we have done IIS, IIT, JEEP, and JEE, and IIS, all these things. That is, for me, the main problem India is facing today is because of this elite system. In German system, where I've lived in 46 years, I've seen it is important to bring the whole youth further and not to only few person, 5 or 10% people. Because they will not make the country, they will not apply, they will not create any jobs, and not engineering coming up. Engineering inside, you are making something new, is coming from the middle, what you can say, people. Not from the high, they are not doing that. And here we think in our education, we concentrate on that level, bring them up by practicing, by doing, by learning. And that is also for me at the college level, the same point. We are starting vocational college. Vocational college means they should also learn by doing, or not passing examination, having big certificate, I have 100% marks, 95% marks, something like that. It's not important at all. So here, I personally believe we should concentrate in our education system here in Auroville, what you can say, practice Karma Yoga by example, having teachers who are really living example, doing Karma Yoga, not just by talking. I know myself, my father, He was talking me when I was small. He was saying me, okay, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, do yoga, this and that, and so I was not following. But later on, I saw how I was living, and I changed myself. But much later, when I was in Germany, you see, then I came to know and see, okay, what he was teaching was right for me. So I learned through that, and again practicing myself. And also my son, he told me once, you see, I have 3 boys, they were not following me all the time. But I had a huge problem one time in my company, and a lot of mobbing going on, and say. And he said, after a few years, he told me, I've learned only one thing from you, how you have managed that crisis, how you manage that, how you are doing that. That was only example that I have learned from that, not from what you have said. So today what I can say, we are coming in the time of digital learning. For me, something which is not inspiring. Where you will get the inspiration? Where you will get the people who are giving you example? There is no one there. Digital cannot give you inspiration. Can you give you maximum certificate? And we are not at present, and I really say, I interpret the mother's word in the sense, we should not educate for certificate. We should educate them that they are becoming a personality. And that is where we are working for. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shankar, you are a principal of a school, and you also teach students. I know that this is not a known fact about you being a principal of a school and teaching students, but you teach Tamil. And this comes a thought is that in a classroom, when children come from different cultural contexts, different abilities or capacities, knowing something, not knowing something, how does one foster an environment when there is so much of, if I can use the word, mixes? How does one foster the environment of being a learner? And when there are so many different complex layers operating it, but how does one really live this context of integral education? Sowing that seed, and as Preeti already mentioned, nothing can ever be taught, but also something that needs to be held. What for you has been your experiment or an experience, and how is that alive in Auroville?
Good evening. Actually, my experience here is more like, I just have to narrow down what I want to say to your question. That's what's going around in my mind now. Yes, children do not just come to school to learn Tamil as a second language. They don't. And I again want to say, there is a famous thing that they come with a built-in capacity. The famous saying is from a Tamil poetess, Avayar. I just have to relate your question to that, that's why. And one day she was actually sitting among the scholars of the Pandya king, and everyone was telling in the thing that, oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can write 1,000 poems in a day, that type of thing they were talking about. And she told, for me, I'm talking about the building capacity of the children from different things. And Avayar, poetess Avayar says in Tamil, that, hey, wait, you scholars, you're talking so many big things. Look at the small birds which are actually knitting and weaving their nests that are hanging in the palms. Any engineers who are here to do that? And where did they learn from? And the perfect wax the wasps and bees can produce with their saliva. That is the factory for such things. And look at the honeycomb. Look at the hexagon thing. they do something which is against the nature. They made the water to stay in the air. The honey doesn't come down. So as the nature of the honey hive. And also look at the texture and the design of spider webs. When all these things are there in nature, what is there for us to talk so high about us? I just want to take your question from there. So here children really were born with this type of capacities, and we didn't bring them. Neither the teachers nor even the parents. It is there. And they come to school, and of course, I really wanted to thank Uday, people like Uday, because he says that he has actually formulated a syllabus for social science, right?
Critical.
I immediately thought, oh, one day I need to meet him to see this syllabus, because believe me, we teachers were not introduced a syllabus that must be taught. They are giving syllabus that we are mechanically following it, and we are so weak to influence those syllabus makers. And hey, look, I don't think this is something needed for these children. We cannot go there. Whether we are working in Auroville or outside Auroville. I mean, I say Auroville, it relates to the ashram and also Delhi ashram, and this setup I'm talking about, people who plan to integral education. Yes, these 5 aspects, I understand. Mind aspect is there everywhere. In every school, Auroville ashram, Delhi ashram school, mind aspect is there. Vital is something there, that is more natural for me. And physical education is there. But again, when you come to spiritual and psychic, I'm sorry. I think these children really, they not only were born with the built-in capacity to learn, but also they have the urge to look into their heroes who are standing in front of them and acting as teachers. They are there, and they are really keen, looking at them very keenly, and just they want to follow. So this is where I want to kind of narrow down to your question, that yes, children are coming from different backgrounds, from 52 nationalities, and some of the children do not even have chances to learn their own mother tongue in Auroville school. I want to say that. When we were in last school, we were really looking for teachers to teach Russian language to a Russian child who came to the school. And unfortunately, we need to go to the parents and say, if you put your child in our school, you need to be our teacher too. Otherwise, we cannot teach him Russian language. Because there were few Russians. And see, this is how we managed. This is how we managed. So again, I want to go back to the syllabus thing, that is there anything that, see, again, it is not the idea that I take it just from your question alone. This takes me to Thiruvalluvar. Thiruvalluvar says, just when he talks about education in that one chapter, he gives 5 kablas. The first kabla says, learn or study. Study that's supposed to be studied. That's where I want to stay. The supposed to be studied, where is the list? That list is actually, for me, your syllabus. If there is any problem with the syllabus, please understand that we teachers are all going to run on a wrong track. Syllabus makers, please understand that. We are going to run on the wrong track, because this is why? See, somehow we bring things in a system. But the real system is what I said. The child was born with the built-in capacity, curiosity, and it wants to copy the role models who are actually standing in the classroom as adults, and when they go to the kitchen, they want to see the ammas who are serving as their role models. When they go to the sports ground, yes, their peer group, especially the older children who are teaching them as peer teachers have to be the role model. Then again, at home, the parents. I'm not complaining, but when they go to the parents, sorry to say, all the teachers who are teaching here, if you put yourself in a triangle, you can connect with the child. Can you connect with the parents? What about that hand? I'm talking about Auroville, Ashram, and Delhi Ashram. I'm not talking even about outside school. Can many teachers, I do know, many teachers are sitting here, how much you can strongly connected with the parents as you get connected with your child that is coming to the school. Because it is so easy to get connected with the child. So do children get connected with the parents in the same way? This triangle is a very dangerous triangle for me. I feel so easy when I am with 25 children in a classroom. I feel so easy, comfortable be with them. But if I need to teach a language, people have to actually say that, look, these languages are, yes, as important as any other. Now I'm coming to my thing. Any other thing, like as you are learning science, maths, technology, anything, the languages are so important. But sorry to say, children give least importance to language classes. There, I always feel like, what am I doing here? Hey, look, this is so important. But here, we don't have any examination system. When I was doing in law school, every year we were enacting minimum 3 to 4 drama, theaters. That was our examination. When you learn something, like you are learning Mahabharata, okay, you take some characters, a small scene, then we enact in Tamil language. Then you have to really learn that thing. And songs, all this, songs that you really like to sing. Somehow we make them interested, and we were doing this, and they were 100% engaged in that. And again, when I want to talk about the perfection, I actually understood the perfection or the level of perfection when I was working with kindergarten children in IKM school. When we were, because again, these are I'm talking about the syllabus and the time frame. Everything is actually putting you in, even in Auroville, please understand and agree with that. I'm expected to give this much minimum because of that child's age. It's age bound. It is class bound. I have to do that. I cannot say that, okay, to a 15-year-old, let's sing only baby songs. Amma inge vava se muttam tata. Then they will say, what are you doing, Shankar, with this, with my son? When is he going to make a conversation with Tamil fellows here? When are they? For me, yes. Again, I don't want to say that, okay, there is nothing to be taught and we can close down the schools. No, not at all. So when these children really get into Tamil's friend's house, then they suddenly bring more than 10 words. The first thing they bring is fish curry. And dosa, idli, all those words. Where did you learn that word, Oh, yesterday I went to his house and I learned all this. Oh my goodness, they are much better teacher than me. The friends who are, as soon as they get connected with some children, transient children always use quite many French words for wound and pain. I said, where do you get that from? Don't you know the word wound? No. They always say, oh, I learned from them, So this is just because of their friends. So multicultural, multi-age group is not a matter at all. It is not a matter at all. What all we want to understand is, that word again pokes me that, you should be an yogin. Yes. Am I? I'm not. Because one thing I can say, I become a co-learner. That really gave me lots of joy. When I considered myself that yes, I'm learning with those children in the kindergarten, it was such a fun. Then people came to me, what are you doing? I'm living. But what is your work? I'm living. But don't you work? No. What do you do? I live with children. I go at 8, you sing with them. As she said, as soon as you actually take a nice book, storybook, and sit and read, you will see them sitting around. Couple of them will be playing around. Let them just play around. So these majority of the class will come and sit and read. And slowly, even some lean on your thigh. You need to allow that. You know that you are not the parent, but still you need to. So many times it is tested. And when you give them, and after the story, do you want to actually draw the character? Here I want to bring that perfection. At that age, for 15 minutes, the child is 100% living with its material. The paper, crayons, pencils, and when they bring that picture to you, for me, it is the perfect picture. One of the newsletters of New Creation Bilingual School that I had published and sent around to friends were full of such drawings, because that was the time that I was like, it really opened my eyes that this is so perfect. It's just a round with a big round as an eye, another round as a pupil of the eye, and all sticking like binding wire thing, hair, locks. It was so beautiful, and we printed all those things. For me, they were perfect because that child, for that 15 minutes, lived with the material you have given with it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's beautiful.
So this is how you need to just put them all together and try to travel with them and try to live with them. That slowly teaches you. The one thing I like in Auroville about Auroville education is the very word, the learning community. That word really suits to the whole community rather than just the school. Because we have to be a member of the learning community, and that's it. And you will become a teacher because they are making you become a teacher every moment they are with you. This is my experience with the school children. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? A couple of them, last takes before I close. Yes, Laksh. Just one last question.
Thank you for a beautiful discussion. My question would be to you, those of you who know about Auroville. You spoke about the 3 principles of teaching. And then I look at Auroville, which came far after those beautiful 3 principles, perhaps after 50 years, no? And here we are with these 3 principles, and we have a cultural zone dedicated for it. And then I look at it, what's the point of having a school then? If the entire, taking a cue from what you said finally, a learning community, if we are ourselves a learning community, and each one of us are pursuing knowledge, education, all our life, perfection, then why dedicate a particular place wherein invariably you have people, perhaps they come join the school with right aspiration, slowly as time progresses, they lose touch with practice, more and more they are academic. Why didn't mother think of having industrial zone, which is a place of karma, work, and have children there itself somewhere, wherein they learn by seeing, by doing? Why dedicate a space in your view? And if I may also ask you a addendum, in ashram, in Auroville, we know that people join anytime and leave anytime. And it becomes all the more difficult because when you're working with somebody, a child from early age, and also with the parents, rightly he said it's a triangle, it's not just children. And then if you have somebody who just joins 11th grader, a 15-year-old or 16-year-old. And then we have to work with the dynamic. I believe in ashram that's not a challenge. You work with the young age. How do you see we can still bring the free progress and keep the spirit alive, even while allowing freely people to join anytime?
All right. About the first part, I'd like us to look at the names that Mother gave when she spoke about education in Auroville. So some time back, a bunch of Aurovillians built a school, went very proudly to Mother and said, "We built a school." She said, "Fantastic. What can we call it, Mother?" The last school. Okay. These Aurovillians went back, I think, tail between their legs, a little puzzled. A few days later, some came back and said, "Mother, please, what did you mean?" And so she wrote down names, you could say, of schools, but rather than campuses or buildings, it actually really gives a progression of education. So we begin with last school, right? So the last school would be the place where okay, let me take you through the names first. So you've got last school. Then you've got after school. 1, 2, 3. 3 phases, all right. Then we go to super school. And we end with? No school. Okay? So if we begin with, so lovely that you start with the last, you start with the end. Because that's, you could say, if you imagine it as a progression, right, into a learning society or a learning community, you begin with very young children, you could say with the last school, when they need to figure out the very basic skills, capacities, be it in terms of setting up habits in the body, in the vital, in terms of setting up capacities in the mind, right? That's the last school, almost the early years of schooling, we could say, right? Where you just get your basics sorted out a little bit. You learn to handle language a little bit. You learn to handle these things. Then you shift into another phase of development in which you're actually going to begin to apply these learnings in less of in an environment that allows you a little bit more freedom to stretch out and perhaps to figure out, say, I have learned my 3.5 words of Tamil, or hopefully more than that, right? And then I go out and I apply that. I figure it out. I speak with friends. I'm put in, or I put myself in situations in which I start to develop these things from within me, right? So here we can come to after school phase 1, when you're sort of discovering, you're developing something, and then you shift to the second phase. What could be that second phase of after school? When you start to go maybe more in depth, right? So if I take, for example, art as an example of that, because in the school where I work, which is called Last School, but we dive quite a lot in that. So you could say the first moment when you enter into art, what is it that we're trying to look for in art? It's not artists, right? It's the capacity to develop beauty, a sense of the aesthetic, and that beauty then translates into a capacity of concentration, of silence, and everything beautiful in every part of the being. So the very first steps, let's say the last school part of that, is just the putting your toe in, getting the shyness away from picking up pencil, drawing something. So there's a lot of freedom in the beginning just to get kids or youngsters or even adults, it could be, into contact with the materials, into contact with the possibility of creativity, right? The next phase would be what? The next phase, we start to go a little bit more in depth by saying, okay, now that you have the understanding of that, how about you pick up something and you're going to look at the technique of it. Can you start to dig into that? So you explore that. The aspect after that is, instead of drawing one picture and being done with it, right, with the correct technique, you take that same picture and you're going to go more in detail, more in detail, more in detail, more in detail. You go into series. And you start to limit the freedom that you had, which was to do anything, and you start to find the freedom within the limits. And so you go deeper, more in the sense of refinement, of concentration, of beauty, etc. Right? And so how do we shift if we've got this last school, after school 1, 2, 3, which are training periods in which you dive into life, as it were, And then we come back to super school. Now, what is super school? It seems like, again, perhaps a more guided environment, but now at a new level. At a level in which I have done my own experience, right? And now I am confronted with this kind of critical thinking. I've developed the capacity to think critically. Now I'm posed problems, real complexities, shown the opposites of everything that I come up with, right? And as we go through that, deeper and deeper into that process, then we emerge into what? Into no school? And what is that? So I would say, I mean, we're 50 years, 50 plus, 55 years down the line. We're still, I think, very attached to our schools here. I think it's a little unfortunate. But we had a moment in Auroville where we threw the baby out with the bathwater. We said, what? No need for that. Let's close all the schools down. The kids asked for the schools back. Because you can't just throw them out unless you're proposing something else. So the question is, how do we do that? How do we, from the youngest age, look at a program of education that is actually giving independence to learners rather than telling them that they need us? Because that's the point of that nothing can be taught. A good teacher should no longer be needed. And the sooner you're not needed, fantastic, you've done your job well.
I think part of your question, Lakshay, was also, if I read you right, that why have a school at all in a very fundamental sense? Is that an accurate assessment?
When it's perhaps for a community where they don't have time for spending time with the younger ones, but in Auroville where you have all the luxury to be with the young ones, why not apply the principles directly where we are working? Because nothing can be taught. Mind needs to be consulted themselves.
So, no, it's a great question. I think to her point, the last point was most helpful, which is the children themselves asked for a school. And interestingly, in the extreme example, even Sri Aurobindo in his early years was homeschooled, right? He did not go through a formal school. That's a very high, yeah, it was exceptional. They had these, it's a privilege to have been homeschooled at the time. If the parents or those two, three individuals who would be responsible for that early education, it would be exceptional. But it's just at a scale at which Auroville operates, 450-ish children at present. It's one has to have a community of teachers. And to your point about industrial zone, if the young students would prefer to apply themselves in a physical manner in some vocational capacity, why not? I think Auroville is flexible enough to allow that, leaving from school and working there. But in that, she referenced this in the early years when Sri Aurobindo wrote these essays on education. He referred to this early period of brahmacharya, of these first 20-25 years, as being in a way the clue to the phenomenal creative output of India in the past. This dedicated, highly intense period during which the child or the student really develops or flowers into a human being, man or woman, is considered a very, it's like the chilla concept in Indian classical music also, which is these intense periods are highly formative. So if the child is offered the opportunity for these, then good outcomes can happen for us, society as a whole, in the collective. So that's why perhaps schools we're not yet done with schools. As Auravan says, my mother referenced, eventually no school. But if we could get to a collective community of learners, like the learning community, broadly speaking, if our own adult population 20-25 years out exemplifies what it means to be continuously creative and continuously learning, then students can perhaps imbibe from that environment. We're not yet there. At the collective, we're way far from that. but yeah, that's
I'll just... So, Lakshay, very nice question, but I would ask you that when Sri Aurobindo is giving these principles, you can't be stuck on the first principle. The second principle is that is the inner nature being consulted? So I would ask you the question that in this community, how many people are consulting their inner nature? And are they, so if they are, then it's the most wonderful place for children to be. It's okay. Then there'd be homeschools. Every family or every community of Auroville can have, little spaces where, as you said, even in the industrial zone, children can be. But all those who are working in the industrial zone, or it could be the agricultural zone, or it could be any zone, are they living with the psychic? Because as mother said, so now you're going to ask me that is everybody in the ashram school living with their psychic being, or is everybody? But that is the aspiration. So at least in a particular space where there is an aspiration to live. And if everyone, mother actually had a dream, right? The dream is one of our documents in Auroville. So what does she say? I got these words just for you. It's beautiful. There should be somewhere on earth a place where the needs of the spirit and the concern for progress would take precedence over the satisfaction of desires and passions, the search for pleasure and material enjoyment. So have we gone beyond this in many ways? Like as Arvind said about art, she said what Sri Aurobindo said when he wrote, he was not an artist, right? He wrote The National Value of Art, again the essays on art, where he talks about what is the first function of art. The first function of art is to develop the aesthetics. That's what she said. To the beauty and to feel. Then she went on to the second function. It develops the refinement. The more and more we are in the world of art, we look at dance, we listen to music, it brings a certain refinement into our character, isn't it? We become more refined. Then somebody is playing some very crude music or doing something crude. It doesn't suit, hey, what are you doing? I don't want to be with that person, right? But then he says those two functions are not important. Then the third function is the most important. If art does not bring you to your spiritual self, he said it is no art. If the art is not helping the artist to go to his spirituality and to go to the reality behind the stones, behind the trees, behind the earth, he says, what is that? Are you looking at that? If you're not, then that is again, so that is the third function of art, and he says the only real function. But for that, we have to go through all the first and the second. We cannot bypass that. But at the same time, imagine if a facilitator who has felt that and who always also immerses the child with the third function from the very beginning. Isn't that so beautiful? That is the place where children should be now, whether it is a place of cement and concrete or whether it is any place. It could be a home, it could be a community, doesn't matter. It could be under a tree. It really doesn't matter. But so there she says, in this place children will be able to grow and develop integrally without losing contact with their souls. This is the most important thing, ne? To go beyond the ego-based consciousness and to make predominantly a soul-based education. So I would ask every adult, are you practicing that? Then we can have children all over. Do not talk that if you're not practicing that. So that is the only thing that I would say. Thanks.
You see, for me, we need space. Space where children can discover their aptitude, what is interesting for them in the school. That is discovering what they like, what they don't like, what is good for them, what is not good for them. And as we grow, there is specialization because today's knowledge is so vast that you cannot have everything. You cannot do everywhere. And specialization, again, you are learning from others. That means you need, again, a space where like-minded people, the people who are working in the same area, that you can inspire or you can exchange. That's why you need college, you need industry, where you can practicing what in industry is going on, the real life. Real life in the sense that you are working, you are fighting, you have discussing, you have problems, facing, all these things, the real life you are learning in the industry. That's why it is important that you are learning, going there, also learning what's happening in the real life. But in the college, when you are there, you have the specialization, you have specialists who are working in a certain area and is inspiring. And that's why it is important that we have spaces. We are creating schools are nothing than a space where gleich age, like-minded people can be there and where they can learn from each other and discover what is their capacity, what is not in their capacity.
Beautiful. And the last 1 minute to wrap up by Shankar.
No, the thing is, when you asked me that, asked the panel about why do we need school, actually, when I was in transition, we conducted a cake contest among the children. I tell you, I would say those children made their cakes at home and brought the cakes, and they all swear that, look, my mother, of course, helped, but we made it ourselves. For me, if one wants to certify them, okay, now you finish your education, yes. At 3 years old, they become all right, because they know how to make cake. Is that okay? Is that enough? That's my thing. Because they passed. They know what to do, but they know one thing, what they wanted to do at that time, and they mastered it. Again, the school is actually our artificial word. In Tamil, it is actually, it's very interesting. The name for schools in Tamil is Pallikudam. Palli is nothing but a place where people sleep. Palliarai is a place where people sleep. Why is it called? Because those days, when the earlier school, it was very interesting when you asked immediately, why do we call those places a school? Because in Tamil, the word is called a sleeping place because those days, the Jain monks were actually staying on hillocks and rocks where they sleep. They live and sleep. Villagers went to them in order to learn. Where do you go? I go to their sleeping place. And Palliyar, please go to the temple. You know how to read Tamil. Every evening after the Rakala Puja, Ratri Puja, they put the idols in a place to sleep. And that place is written Palliyarai. It's a sleeping room. So schools are called Pallikodam, sleeping halls in Tamil. Why do we need sleeping halls? Anyway, when I was actually 18 years old and when I wanted to go to college, my father asked me, put me as a student. This was my father's question that, why do you want to go to the college? You know how to do farming. For him, I supposed to be a farmer. He taught me everything, what I supposed to do in his land. Therefore, he said, what do you want to learn? Why do you want to learn? That was the second question. No, Appa, I want to do something else. But he couldn't understand. He could not understand for more than 10 years why I actually kept myself away from the house and away from him. While he was taking all his cows and goats and went into the field, I took my books and went into the college, and he did not know why I was doing it. So, for him, when I was 15, I learned everything. What I supposed to learn? I know how to plow the land. I know how to weed. I know how to, irrigate the land. I know how to harvest and thresh and prepare seed for the next sowing season. For him, that was the education. The simple question is, why do you want to go to the college? I couldn't answer. Because he thought, okay, he learned how to live, how to work. So yes, we need to actually put them together. If you don't want to call them school, where? A gathering place. Let's call it a gathering place.
I like the sleeping place.
Yeah, sleeping place. Yeah, but that's the real word. I'm sorry.
Wow. Quite a deep, rich, reflective conversation, and present to the gifts that each one of you have given from your sharing of what is really needed, right? Starting from Auroville, of the ability of giving that safe space for me to look at sincerity within and the connection to the soul which Preeti brought about. And can I hold that space? Most importantly, as me, can I hold that space for myself when I'm asking that, whether it is for the children or for the teens? To what Uday had to offer in terms of what is really being taught in that classroom, and when the curriculum is being taught, what does that curriculum really need to be? What's the need and what's the want? And whose need are we really looking at, right? Is it the need of the child, or is it the need of the adult who think we have to? So in that whole process, what is education? Who needs to be educated? What needs to be educated? And learning and the unlearning process. Thank you for bringing in the principles, and I think that's the fundamental, that yes, and not stopping at step one. And therefore, how the spaces can bring those alive, and bringing the importance of the role model, and the fact that in your Karma Yogi, you never know who will learn, what will be learned. And when that seed is sown, we never know when that will blossom. And when you were sharing, I was looking back at my life, and I said, yeah, that little example, and this is where 10 or 15 years later, became a fruit. And beautiful anecdotes, very practical questions. And thank you for the gift of the triangle. But yes, those are spaces, because education is not only in schools. It is a lifelong process of a learning and an unlearning. And it's also on the spiritual path of unlayering what this conditioning we have been born with, right? And there's never a full stop. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for this beautiful gathering to be here. And I wish we could go on. I've already got warning 30 minutes ago. And just like a small token of appreciation, nothing really much, but a memento of our time together.
Yes, of course.